All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Christopher Lowry here with Brushfire Mind. It is 2100 on a Friday night. We are live for the last time on a Google Hangout. So starting next week, we're actually going to be switching over to 100% YouTube live stream. And that'll be, so that we got some technical stuff to do with that. But we will be continuing to broadcast every Friday night at 2100 until we change the time. Now that's another piece to keep an eye out for. We'll be changing our time probably sometime in the next month or two. We'll be moving to a different night, and we may back it up to an hour earlier. We'll just have to see how that shakes out. We got some logistical concerns to figure out there, but keep an eye on it. Some changes are coming, and we appreciate your patronage. We appreciate your views, your likes, and I've seen that you guys have been sharing us on Facebook. Thanks for that too. Anything we can do to build the numbers and spread the message. So tonight, the message. We're going to be talking about the fallacy of egalitarianism, the myth of equality. The left is obsessed with this idea of equality. Now, of course, we know that our Declaration says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creators, obviously, I would never generally yada yada the rest of that, but the piece that we're interested in is this idea that all men are created equal. Now, I'm 6.5 feet tall. I could change your tire without a jack. I speak a half a dozen languages. I'm a special kind of guy, and I know I'm sounding a little bit like a megalomaniac going through that, which is fair. I accept that, but there's a point. There's a reason I say it. I walk into a room, and it's a slim chance I'm going to be looking anybody dead in the eye. I have attended schools with very, very difficult bars to entry that not everybody can get into. I've served in the military. That, again, is a pretty small number of Americans who are even eligible to serve. So the idea that all men are created equal, the statement gets abused. I am more than happy to, and I will hold firm to, and I will fight, shed blood over the idea that all men are endowed equally with the right to their life, their liberty, and the pursuit of their happiness. Not that they're entitled to be happy. You are not entitled to be happy. You do not have a right to be happy. You have the right to try to be happy. And you have the right to pursue that happiness unencumbered by the ill will or aggression of an external source, of an external force. One of the things that we should expect our government to do, one of the very, very, very few things that we should expect our government to do, is through the use of tort and law enforcement to prevent bad actors from causing harm or impeding that pursuit of happiness for individuals. Now let's get into this philosophy of egalitarianism. At its very basic core, the idea of egalitarianism is the idea that everybody deserves the sameness. Now, there are degrees of this assertion. I could be considered an egalitarian given the assertion that I believe everyone is equally entitled to their life, their liberty, and their pursuit of happiness until they willfully jettison that right. Now, a man who is willfully taking that right, who is willfully causing harm to other persons, he has forfeited his right to life, liberty, and happiness. But as long as you're not hurting anybody, do what you do, baby. Um, it's been no secret on this show I'm not a big supporter of Gary Johnson. I have a lot of problems with Johnson's positions. I want so badly to be a full-on libertarian, but a Gary Johnson libertarian is no libertarian. Um, you talk about somebody who's in favor of carbon taxes and who's in favor of open borders and this week saw shit. Essentially, he's a libertarian on the question of drugs. That's pretty much the place where Gary Johnson is interested in not having a bunch of regulations. Now, on that,
And gun.
bring it on, Steve.
Oh, I just said and gun.
Yeah, he tapped Weld. I
Retracted his position, said he was wrong. But go ahead. I don't want to get off message. Keep going.
No, we're going to get off message for just a second. For just a second, I'm just going to say this about Weld. Because you just said he retracted his position. Here's the thing. One of the only complaints, one of the only direct complaints that I've heard out of you or Cade about Trump is that he's flip-flopped and you can't trust his position. So why does Weld get a pass on having been not just soft on the Second Amendment, but foursquare against it? Why does Weld get a pass?
Give money to Hillary Clinton.
Say again?
He didn't give money to Hillary Clinton. I don't care what was expedient. Everybody's going to say things, do things. It's come to the point, dude, this is a shit sandwich with 3 layers. The one that I've got's the furthest from the worst level of shit.
When was he completely against it? I understand his misinterpretation of it. By the way, I have not devoted my vote, but
Weld signed a bill for banning assault weapons in Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's still not totally. It's the wrong kind. It's totally when it comes to you and I, but it's still not totally like Democrat totally.
Yeah, no, it's no Brady bill, but
right.
That's why I said I didn't want to get off on a rabbit hole this early in the thing.
So let me steer us back.
Yep.
Egalitarianism, the idea that everybody's got some equality going on. Well, there are levels to that concept of equality. Where I stand, everybody gets an equal chance. You are perfectly, completely entitled to go your happy ass out there, open a business, get a job, go to school, do what you can, do what you do, make a living, be happy, build an empire. Do it. Great. What you are not entitled to is to do that at my expense, or anyone else's for that matter, without a negotiated contract between 2 consenting parties. That's the problem. The enemy's position on this is not equality of opportunity, but equality of outcome. That's how you come to things like communism. That's how you come to this idea that everybody goes out and works to the best of their ability and is rewarded to the depth of their need. Oh, that's awesome. So if I'm going to get paid based on what I need, no matter how hard I work, why am I even going to show up? I mean, unless I'm directly engaged in something that's just like my life's dream pursuit, which most people are not, then why would I even show up in the morning? That's the problem with the extreme side of the egalitarianism. This idea that everybody gets the same outcome. It can't be done. And where it breaks down is this. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. Being bad at math is the gateway drug to liberalism, to leftism. We all love that old Iron Lady quote, socialism's great until you run out of other people's money. Right? I'm paraphrasing a little bit. But when you start trying to make everybody equal, there are simple economic laws in play, and the thing that you got to understand about the laws of economics, these are not quiet suggestions. These are not polite figures. Economics is a hard science. The numbers are real. It's not a question of how the system is put together. The system that's put together is still going to obey the basic principles of economics. And the law of supply and demand is just immutable. The more rich people you have, the less valuable they are. Ergo, if everybody is suddenly rich by the definition that we hold today, then none of their wealth has any value. Because that's just that simple.
That's not true.
The simple fact. Okay, I'll come back to you and hear your argument in just a minute. The simple fact of the matter is, while the capacity of man to create wealth is infinite, an infinite amount of wealth can be created. That infinite amount of wealth there's the infinite potentiality for the creation of wealth. But at no point is wealth ever itself infinite. The amount of wealth that exists is finite. Currency, for example, is not wealth. Currency is not even money. It's an artificial subdivision of the property of wealth. If currency artificially subdivides that number more and more and more, i.e. you print more bills, they lose their rarity and become less valuable. If there are 100 $1 bills in the world, then you can buy a lot with one of them. If there are a quadrillion of them, then one could pay off the national deficit. Wealth has a finite value, and that value is subdivided by the printing of currency and the assignment of commodity. There is only so much to be had and to be spread out. So at the end of the day, what happens is you can have wealthy people, middle income people, and poor people, or everybody can be poor. We start poor. Everybody is born in abject poverty, owns nothing, and hasn't the capacity to acquire anything. As a bitty baby, you cannot earn, you cannot even get your own food. You are utterly dependent on an external source for your survival. Then you grow your little claws and your little teeth, and then you've got a little bit more of a chance, but you're still heavily dependent. I don't care who you are, what family you're born into, until the legal documents vest that family wealth in your name in perpetuity, you simply do not have it. All right, John, go ahead and debunk what I said.
What you were talking about was relative wealth. If everybody in America has $1 million, then in theory, nobody's rich relative to each other. But once you cross the border, even a middle-class person was wealthy or rich if he was to go down to a poor country. That's where borders come in, and that is why borders are so necessary. They allow the accumulation and the protection of wealth. When you remove all borders, you remove the capacity of any person or group of persons to be wealthier than somebody else. If Steve and John and Rod and Chris get together and create some wealth, but then our neighbors from Guatemala can move into our created wealth and take it as their own because there's no borders, now we're all equally poor again. So now the four of us no longer have any reason to strive at all. You cannot have wealth or riches without borders. You have to have a front door on your house to say, this is mine. I worked for it. I earned it.
You don't have locks on your doors. You don't have locks on your doors because you're afraid some Mexican's going to come in and wash your dishes in the middle of the night.
That's right. You know, I mean, Mexico is wealthier than Guatemala. Guatemala is wealthier than Haiti. Haiti is wealthier than Zimbabwe. The average person from Guatemala could probably walk down a street in Zimbabwe and buy himself a pretty nice dinner, or some other variation of the display of wealth, because he is relatively wealthier than the average fellow in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe is locked within a system where their system doesn't work. Guatemala's works a little bit better. America's works a little bit better. But when you remove all of the borders, now a guy from Zimbabwe can walk into your front yard and say, it's mine now. He may not do it directly, but he will do it indirectly by getting citizenship and by being able to assume all the rights and privileges of your country and your infrastructure and your job availability without ever having put any skin in the game. Meanwhile, as far as the person, you made a statement that said that all people are born equally poor. Well, that's not true either. Some people are born to better sets of parents. We call that white privilege. Now, it's not polite to say so, but why is it that the average white guy grows up and has more wealth and opportunities than the average ghetto dweller of any color? It's not because of color. It's not because of money fell out of a cloud into his lap. It's because he or she was raised with the right character traits that enable the accumulation of more wealth than someone who grew up without those things. So, in essence, you are being punished with the equality or egalitarian theme of white privilege. In other words, you, Steve, you are wealthier than a guy who grew up in a ghetto because you had white privilege. But when you break it right down, what does your white privilege come out to be? Well, your parents raised you to be honest and hardworking. And that's your privilege. So your white privilege of being honest and hardworking forces you to have more wealth than someone who is not honest and not hardworking. And that's your fault. That's where egalitarianism falls down, is it is punishing people for doing the right thing.
Okay, so I'm going to take issue just a little bit. First, you haven't actually argued against anything that I said.
What I've done is I've polished it.
Right. What you were describing is kind of in a little more detail what I laid out about it. If you do not have a wealthy class, a middle class, and a lower class,
and we're all poor. We're all poor. And
right.
I will not tolerate it.
You can have some rich people or no rich people, but you can't have all rich people.
But here's the problem. I know poor. 10 days ago, I had $2 in my pocket. Count them, 2. I had to figure out how in the hell am I going to pay rent, eat, pay gas, pay my car bill, everything else. So I went out and got a day job. and I do my day job in a fish processing plant where I do hard labor. Now, today, or just this afternoon, the fellow said to me, if you want a permanent job here, keep showing up and keep doing the right thing, and you'll have a job. The funny thing is the other day, just yesterday, he fired some guy because the guy couldn't handle the job. So there's my white privilege. I worked myself back into having a $20 bill in my pocket, and he's out of a job. So what were we unequal in? We were unequal in work ethic and the ability to get the job done, to learn on the job, and basic willpower to say, I will make this happen. Willpower is what got me through the Army despite being unequal in age to everybody else. I know a few things about inequality. I've had to fight this hand pushing me down all of my life, telling me that anything I ever achieved was because someone gave it to me. And I know for a fact that's a bunch of garbage. I've had to fight it all my life. What?
Oh, I say good save. Trying to clean up the language.
Well, okay, I'm trying to be a little bit more even keeled, but it is something that has rankled me all of my life. If I go into a job, I have to not only fight to prove my value, but I have to double down on it because the other guy has an affirmative action point, or he is a poor migrant from Somalia, or he has some kind of a J1 visa, or I'm always the last guy to ever get any kind of special consideration. So I have to make up for that by being harder working, by being more honest, and by outthinking everybody else. All of my life, I have had to fight a system that's been holding me down. Now, Chris might recognize this book. A long time ago, one of Ayn Rand's first books was called Anthem.
Yep.
Anthem is about a fellow who is born unequal. He's a little stronger and a little smarter than everybody else. So in this hyper-egalitarian society, they put a 50-pound weight around his waist and a set of headphones on his ears that constantly blare white noise in his ears so he can't think straight. Until one day he says, I've had enough. And he walks away from that. That's a short form of it. But he's held to be a social criminal because he doesn't want to be an egalitarian. And he refuses to be held down. Well,
right.
If I have Hillary Clinton who's going to impose third world goat shaggers on me and expect me to work a little harder to cover their shortcomings, I will say no. I have then three choices. I can fight, I can hide, or I can run. But I cannot simply cover their slack. Because if I cover their slack, well, heck, you did it today, why not 5 more? How about 10 more? Work a little harder, John. You can do it. From each according to his ability to each according to the need. You don't need much, but work a little harder for us. What's the point?
And that brings me back around. How many times have you heard somebody say, "Yo, you know, communism looks great on paper."
Yeah, join me in a fish processing plant.
Right. I've heard 1,000 people say it. I'm sure communism looks great on paper, but when you introduce the human element and greed and blah blah blah, what? No, communism doesn't look good on paper.
It's garbage.
Communism on paper is everybody work as hard as we can hope you to work, and you will live on fish and crackers. You will live on the whatever the staple food is. You will all be equally poor. Mm-hmm. So, guys, I'm a little disappointed in the show tonight because unfortunately I think it's we've only been on for about half an hour and we've already completely debunked pretty effectively the whole myth of egalitarianism.
I know
I think that's
there are whole branches of professional philosophy that have been trying to do that for 300 years.
I saw the Soviet Union up close. When I was 25, I went to Russia. And I saw how it had played out.
But real quick, John, for our viewers at home, he's so old that they were still actually communists.
No, they were ex-communists. But well, now I remember when the wall came down. Rod will remember it also. My point is, and Rod was actually there right around the same time I was. So he also saw the downfall of communism and how it has really played out.
This here's a trumpet. These are used to blow walls down.
All right.
Right.
Just blow it.
Keep walking.
That's for blowing walls down.
Well, I guess my point is,
we got some walls up in here. How much do the commies charge people on their taxes? Over there today, the income tax rate's 13%. Right? That's
they're not communists in Russia. They're nationalists.
Well, whatever. They're only charging 13%. I think they got a memo somewhere.
You think?
It hit them in the head with a ball-peen hammer. You know, the ball-peen hammer. It's kind of like what my head looks like. If somebody hit them in the head with a ball-peen hammer and said, you can't take that much money from folks, right? You can't set your economy up so that it's only producing forever, right? That ain't no good, right? People want to have some stuff that's got some sex to it. They want some sexy appliances. They want stuff that works, right? Now, we don't got stuff that works. Appliances for the kitchen, they go and last about to go back to Lowe's and buy some more. The lessons thing, you know, they almost get it right. We can make sexy product, but we can't get people for very long, right? And the Russians could make stuff that would work at 1,000 different temperatures. But then people were just so poor. I have seen with my own very eyes, these eyes right here in Russia, people in the winter having to get into dumpsters to get food to eat, right? That's in Russia. And that's in, you know, Kazan. That's called the cauldron. You know what I'm saying? That used to be the capital before it was Moscow, back when the Muslims was in control, right? The Caliphate of Kazan, right? Now, look at here. All these problems, all these years, and nobody ever solves jack, right? They talk about it. They don't get nothing done. You see what I'm saying? And so what was it we debunked?
Я тоже увидел. Бабушка, которая такая холодная, такая бедная, не может жить.
Yeah, I do как я могу. Okay? I'm going to do what I can do. That's what you were saying. I'm going to do what I can do. And you were talking about...
What I said was I saw a tiny little old lady freezing to death in a subway station, huddling up next to the subway tracks to get warm.
I bought the socks from the lady, and they didn't want me to buy the socks from the little lady. The little lady was abject, poverty, poor, 9 years old looking, and I said, she's knit some socks, and I'm buying them. And then they wanted to check them out and see if they was all right. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. I looked at them. I'm full grown. I can look at a pair of socks that a lady's knit and say, okay, that's worth $1.
Easy.
Right?
I saw those deals too.
Some little lady that's sitting in a damn subway trying to get something to eat for her grandchildren. She wasn't sitting there for herself. She already had enough money for her. Come on, man. Now, we were talking about white privilege and all this kind of stuff a minute ago, right?
Let me tell you about that real briefly. Let me jump into this.
I agree with you 100%.
Egalitarianism and Marxism is not, we don't have that in this country. What we have is racism.
All right, pause. Hold on a minute, guys. You two are nailing it. It's fantastic shit, but you can't step on each other.
We're not. No. Rod and I are not mad at each other. We're mad at the system.
John, stop. Listen to me. I'm not accusing you of arguing with each other. You're both trying to talk at the same time, even when you're agreeing with each other, and the microphones can't handle it. That's the only thing. Just try to get it.
Let me go very briefly, and then I'll let Rod do his thing.
You ain't got to be brief.
Egalitarianism was not swallowed by Europeans. So Trotsky, in his sly wisdom, decided to switch over to racism, especially in America. When they could not push the egalitarian theme in America, the class warfare theme, they switched to the race theme. So, you, Rod, are rich in whiteness. That's, in essence, what it breaks down to. That's white privilege. So, therefore, you have to suffer because you were born too white. Marxism has morphed into a monster in America that we did not recognize as Marxism until quite recently, because we thought we beat the commies. We were wrong. Hillary Clinton is about as communist as they come. I met commissars like her in Russia, and so did you.
Yeah. Professors
who are willing to play the game and say everything they want to get, or everything that people want to hear, so long as they get their $1,000 suits, or in her case, a $12,000 suit. Not a shred of integrity and decency in that woman. She'll say anything you want to hear. I'm doing it for the people, or I'm doing it for the poor, benighted black person, or Mexican person, or Chinese person. She will play the race game because they can't play the equality game as well as they used to be able to.
Real quick, isn't that actually exactly what I was about her during
That's right.
the initial campaign?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Egalitarian Marxism in Russia is race warfare in America. It's the same fight. I thought we beat communism. I was wrong. Now it's coming back and invading my country in the guise of a Muslim migrant invasion to import more unwashed third world, homeless people, whatever the hell it is, to change the demographic, to win the class or race warfare against me. And I got nothing to give.
They didn't convince everybody to abort enough babies, did they? So they had to bring some from somewhere else.
That's right.
Now, I was going to digress.
Black people went conservative.
I was going to digress a second and talk about wealth for just a moment. Ogre mentioned something about wealth and how there was a finite pool of money, right? Now, the gold standard thing, that's really good for somebody that owns a gold mine, right? I mean, if you own the gold mine, you want to have the gold standard, right? Because you're getting rich. Because they're giving you something in exchange for your gold, right? What do you get in exchange for your gold when you own the gold mine? They don't talk about that. Now, wealth is created by labor, right? You're born, and then your folks pour all kinds of money on you. They wash you, they feed you, they do all this stuff, they educate you some sort of way. And then you grow and you start working, right? And then if there's no money around and you're working, then how are you going to get paid, right? Now, that means either one of two things have to occur. Either to become more valuable as the population increases, or you have to debase the currency by printing more of it. Which means that when they debase the currency, they're not exactly giving grandma and them enough interest on their money for the debasement. Now are they? You see what I'm saying, Ogre? With that, there was the thing about the ratio of the value of silver to gold, 16-1. That was in the progressive era, and they were trying to get that solidified and coded.
Now,
right?
it's important. It's important. I know you know. Hang on, Rod. I know you know this, but I want to say it so the viewers hear it. It's important to remember that even when the currency is on the gold standard, gold itself still is not money. Money is an abstract that is separate from that. The gold standard, in that case, the gold itself is just another type of currency.
Well, Marx was considered to be the father of economics, and you got to read about 2 pages of Das Kapital to get to his MCM to his MCM equation, right? Where he's talking about how, and vice versa, right? Money is just potential energy, and capital is kinetic energy. Can we say it that way? Capital is money deployed. It's a machine you own, and it's running, right? So if you don't have enough money to buy a printing press that you can print money on, you're not going to have a lot of money, according to Bernanke. Well, what you were talking about, folks that they were waiting around for the folks to die, and I was saying that was a contingent remainder, right?
Right. When you've got the heirs can't be defined until the estate holder actually perishes, because for one, you have to wait to see how many heirs are left over when he dies.
Well, you got to pay creditors first.
Right.
You got to pay the bills before you start paying the heirs, right? And so what they've got left is a contingency remainder, right? And another thing I wanted to digress on for just a minute is back to where John was. John, I hope you didn't run off too far, because the school system knew that I came from a good family, right? How hard was it for them to figure that out? You see what I'm saying? They make, well, you have to, the adults have to come in when they register the children, and they, where does daddy work? Where does mommy work? It's almost, they can figure out from the forms that you have to turn in just to sign the children up from school, whether you're a professor, a lawyer, a doctor, or a deadbeat, right? And they know it right off. So the blinkers go on from kindergarten to the 1st grade, right? That's the first bit of information that the school systems get about children. The next little bit is when they figure out how smart that booger is, right? So you've seen there's different bell curves, right? There's different bell curves.
Well, you're starting to stumble into into this idea of tracking within the public school system. And this isn't some conspiracy theory shit. This is documented. This is law. This is how it's done. Of
course. Well, John was talking about how they wanted to put a sack over my head when I was a kid. Right? They wanted to put a sack over his head. He's younger than I am. They were after me before they were after old Baldy over there.
Right.
Right? And they were after you.
Well, and
right?
There's this thing in the system called tracking where people are...
Now, here's my thesis. I'm just going to throw it at you and see if it sticks. The only real discrimination in this world is against intelligent people who aren't sold out. Now you like that one. I see that ogre grin. That's who they don't like. All right. Now we need to get these other guys in here. Cade is over there. He wants to diatribe. And how do you pronounce that fellow's name? Rodemoyer? He looks like he needs to say something bad. Come get me. I've done talked too much.
For 28 minutes.
I ain't got nothing to say about it. We're all batting for the same team when it comes to most of this. I'm going to give it to Cade.
No, that's exactly what I've been thinking through most of it. I've been just kind of sitting back and enjoying the ride. I don't have a lot to argue here. Now, unlike communism, Chris, you and I have had that conversation many times. Exactly what you said, that communism does not look good on paper, especially someone who is to someone who believes in, you know, America, and what it's supposed to be.
Well, and
however,
real quick, everybody I've ever heard say the words "communism looks good on paper" has this bizarre assumption that somehow you have a flat screen TV, an Xbox, and steaks on the Barbie under pure communism, which is just not the case. Because that is wealth, and wealth is not infinite.
Yeah. Well, but I was going to say that egalitarianism, at its most basic, does look good on paper. It's a nice sentiment. It's nice to believe that all of us are born with the same opportunities and all this other stuff. Now, egalitarianism in practice can be a productive thing, a useful thing, if it's practiced as is. It's very general, very basic form, which is to afford everyone the same rights, not privileges, rights, the same rights and the same freedoms, that because you were born an American citizen, you may enjoy all of these American rights and freedoms. And as long as those are not impeded, you are successfully living in an egalitarian society. That is not the case because none of these Candyland type liberal utopias exist. And so what's happened is that egalitarianism has fallen victim to this disease that the left all shares, which is most of them are sadly at a stage 4 apologia. And apologia is a disease that I just made up about 4 seconds ago. That basically means you understand what it means. You apologize for everything. You have to. You wake up in the morning and you look at your skin. You say, "Well, damn, I'm white. God, I feel terrible about that." And then you get in a car and you bang your head against the windshield and you say, "God, oh man, I feel so awful that I got this car. God, I'm so sorry that I have this car." And it goes back to what John was harping on earlier. My God, if you did everything that these stage 4 apologia victims are suggesting you do, there would be no pursuit of happiness because you'd be miserable all the time. All the time. And speaking of the pursuit of happiness, that's another thing that gets seriously lost in translation is the definition of happiness, because in the democratic mind, the definition of happiness is whatever we damn well tell you makes you happy. In communism and Marxism and all of that, happiness is what the state tells you it is. You are happy. Congratulations. And then the liberal happiness is whatever you want to do, whatever gives you the surge of chemicals that tells you I am euphoric. You need to be. You have the right to pursue that feeling of euphoria at anyone else's expense at any given time.
Right. Essentially, on the face of it, for the liberal, when you start talking about happiness, their definition is hedonism, essentially. For
a lot of it, yeah.
All these headstrong, smart-ass, wish it was a fucking intellectuals. They ain't interested in no Aristotelian happiness. They ain't interested in no Nicomachean ethics. No, they're interested in their big screen TVs and their fine cheese and a glass of wine and a nice big porterhouse.
No.
Oh, wait, no, I'm sorry, you're right, John. I stand corrected because they're all a bunch of vegans. John, you muted yourself. You're screaming at a dead microphone. Try it again.
Leftists are interested in getting as much deviant satisfaction as they can. There is a declining marginal utility. If I can smoke a cigarette today, one at a joint tomorrow, heroin after that, and a little bit of crack after that, it keeps ratcheting up to a higher and higher or lower and lower level of satisfaction.
I want to smoke your crack.
Well, okay. And that's what winds up. It's nihilism. Ultimately, the leftist pursuit of, what was the term you used, Chris?
I said they were a bunch of hedonists.
Hedonism, yes. Okay. Hedonism requires a bigger thrill each time because it gets boring. Oh, I've done that. Let's try something new. You know, we have gays, want to have gay marriage, want to have gay adoption, want to have transgender. Well, heck, why not just require all babies to be transgendered when they're born? Then they can explore their full potential when they're 3. After a while, you have no standards left, and humans turn into oatmeal.
All right, I'm gonna back you off there because we're getting not entirely off the topic, but you're starting to stumble into Brave New World territory, and that's a great topic for another show. Brave New World explores something that is a little different than egalitarianism. Well, no, quite frankly, it's a lot different than egalitarianism, because that posits a world where it's not so much from each according to his ability to each according to his need, as you're born and programmed to work and operate in a specific profession. I really loved this. Aldous Huxley, the author of the book, made a point to describe the extent to which people are indoctrinated into their professions. And to describe that, he talked about babies who, they're hundreds of clones that are all identical little boys that are going to be airline mechanics. And when they, as they're developing as young children, their playrooms and their cribs and their playpens are all on these unstable foundations, so they're constantly moving around and all this. And then they go through their professional training so that not only are they comfortable walking on the wings of an airplane while it's in flight so that they can perform mechanical maintenance on the aircraft, they're actually uncomfortable when they're not doing that. But that same book talks a lot about sexual exploration and the sort of the immoral demystification of the sexual experience. So in Brave New World, they talk about love play, where young children, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old children, are encouraged to be naked together and to play together and play. I think he called them love games, not sex games, but essentially they don't have the children actually having sex, but they have them engaging in activities with one another, which make them comfortable with sex moving forward, basically socializing them to an incredibly promiscuous lifestyle in the future. People who have tens of partners in a week is the idea there. And part of that is about removing the interest from the common people in reproducing sexually, so that the mechanical government can own the monopoly on the production of offspring. And that was a whole lot of nice long string of, this is why we're not going to go down that road, John. Sorry, boys.
But since you brought it up.
Yeah, buddy.
Since you brought it up, I don't know what happened to my camera, but since you brought it up, the communism, the socialism, depends on a positive population growth, doesn't it?
Yes.
There you go. And if you have a negative population growth, then you're going to collapse. Right? Especially if you're already taxing.
It's essentially, yeah, communism is essentially the shittiest Ponzi scheme ever.
Okay, one question. Computers, automation, and 3D printers. Do they make communism feasible? End question.
Not until they can produce food, at which point I'll give you a maybe. Until we can produce comestible, nutritive material from inorganic input, then no. But once we hit that threshold, once we hit that point, then it would be perfectly functionable to have a world, a society where everybody is equally entitled to feed themselves at the level of basic subsistence from a mechanical generator which just creates food out of garbage, essentially. It's kind of like it would be like a pig, you know, a pig that can eat an apple, essentially garbage, and turn it into bacon. Once technology gets that level of magic, then sure, I suppose. But even
who does not work and does not strive is not a man.
Hang on a second, John. Even with that level of technology, making it possible for an actual communist society to exist, the society is still a miserable one. See, communism as is cannot succeed. Given an adequate level of technology, communism can succeed, but even a successful communism is misery.
And that brings us back to capitalism. Yay!
People do not...
Proper capitalism, not this bullshit that we've got right now.
People don't want to be equal.
Okay. Well, some people want to be more equal than others.
No, they don't. They want to pretend that's maybe what they're saying. But even in the most communist country in the world, one person says, I want to be the best communist. I want to be the communist mother who has 11 children. Oh, well, let's have a mother making communist. People are always going to...
You are.
Well, I've always said Stalin was really good at getting other people to be communists.
Yes.
Okay. Well, my point is that people have an intrinsic desire and need to excel at something. In the Soviet Union, they passed out medals.
And all of their kids get a trophy now.
Well,
everybody gets a trophy, yay.
Well, okay. When you give out gold stars to every kid, what are you teaching that kid?
That there's one bell curve.
No. You are teaching that child weakness.
Yeah, I understand. There's only one bell curve. It's all the same.
That kid can never succeed.
Well, hang on. In point of fact, John, you're not teaching that child weakness. Rather, what you are teaching them is that their effort hasn't any value. You're making them weak. You're not teaching them weakness. You're not teaching them to be weak. That would suggest that they were cognizant of the affliction that you were putting upon them. But in point of fact, what you're doing, just like we were talking about earlier with devaluing currency, the participation medal is just like printing money. The medals are now so abundant that they haven't value. They don't have any value at all.
Just like devaluing sex in Brave New World. Exactly. It has no value.
Exactly. If you want more of something, subsidize.
Now human contact, now a relationship, now a marriage has no value.
But do y'all remember a long time ago how upset Steve got at me when I pointed out that the economists believe that the real true difference in between the capitalism and the communism was really where the planning occurs, right? Because what are the things that are required in order to have capitalism are what? Competition? Does anybody like competition?
Hell yeah.
Oh, you do. We always win, right?
That's reasonable.
Okay, but if you're on the losing end of the stick all the time, would you like competition? Or if you had a lot to risk, would you like competition?
Oh no, I do love to take a big risk. But well, no, that's not really true either. I don't really gamble. I mean, I don't gamble, but I'll make you a bet.
Well, I like competition, but nobody has to die in the midst of it. You don't have to. It's not a winner take all sort of scenario. We don't have to have a zero sum game economy that ends up being feudalism. You understand what I'm saying? So, towards the end, I always try and get us talking about, well, what on earth are we going to do that's going to do us any good? Right?
A clean capitalist economy cannot be zero sum. You cannot have a clean capitalist economy that is zero sum. If you have a functioning capitalist economy, believe it or not, guys, and I'm talking to the viewer now, believe it or not, it is possible for two parties to engage in commerce and for them both to profit. You can both come out the other side of the deal with more than you went in with. In fact, you can both come out of the deal with more than either of you brought to the table to begin with. That's the magic of capitalism. Because what you bring to the table is more than your goods or your actual capital. You might have two guys come to the table, one with goods and one with currency. They both brought labor.
Well, but you see, the reason when Galbraith was talking about the little fingers and all this kind of stuff, the location of planning in the United States, planning was everywhere. Everybody was planning. Everybody that could go to the local state office and register their corporation could start planning what they were going to do with their company, right? And they didn't have to answer to Wall Street. You see what I'm saying? But when you get it down to where Wall Street's going to be determining what all the inputs and outputs are, you no longer have capitalism. You see what I'm saying? Now, if I decided I wanted to come up with a company, I'm going to come up with a little niche, right? I'm going to find those poor consumers that are just dying to have something that will do them some good, like an EpiPen, and I'm going to try and sell it to them at a cost that they can afford, right? Because I want to be able to sell them to them. Now, there's so many basic principles which have been discarded by these, can we call them egalitarians in Washington and New York City?
We can call them self-modeled egalitarians. They want you to think that they're egalitarians. They want you to...
Well, Stalin wanted you to think that he was a communist.
Interest.
But, I mean, you understand my point, right? Now, in order for us to have stuff that isn't adulterated and for us to have stuff that isn't fake and stuff that isn't cheap, we're either going to have to find somebody who's willing to provide those goods and services to us, or we're going to have to become people who provide those goods and services. Because Wall Street debases currency the same way they debase the tomato. You go buy a tomato that's grown by the little farmer for his own family to eat, and that's a different tomato, isn't it, than the one that you buy from the big corporate farm.
Hell, just look at the carrots you buy at the grocery store versus the big fucking horse chokers we get at the farmer's market. You can't sell the giant. We get these carrots, okay? We get these carrots sometimes from the farmer's market. Hand to God, they are as big as my forearm, and I mean just gigantic carrots. 1.5 2 foot long, big around as a strong man's wrist. And they're sweeter, and they taste better than the little skinny bastards you get at the grocery store. But you can't buy them at the grocery store, and it's not because your big bucks, your Publix, your Walmarts, whatever, can't get their hands on them. It's because at the quantity that you're buying that carrot, when you're buying those big ass carrots, they can't sell them at a price that includes a profit margin.
Well, there's a scale of things. You see what I'm saying? Some amount of this and some amount of that. who paves the roads? Who owns the roads? If you own something, can you hire somebody to work on it?
Now that is a fantastic question.
Now, does the government not have the right to do all of the things that it grants other people the right to do? Just for efficiency's sake? I mean, do we have to provide Wall Street with the bonuses and all this kind of stuff that they wish to have? Do we have to give them the money to develop the medicine with and then give them the patent both and then to take all the money? Do we have to give General Motors a bailout and then sell the stock at an inopportune time so that we can realize an $11 billion loss where in a position where they're paying a 30-cent dividend at that time with a PE ratio of 4? I mean, in 2014 when they sold General Motors off, poof, you've got a PE of 4 and you've got a dividend of 30 cents per share now, 38 cents a share. And the outstanding number of shares is 1.56 billion. Now, they could have just held on to it. What would have been wrong with them just holding on to it?
Yeah, okay, so...
Why on earth do you have to sell it and cause all these people to realize an $11 billion loss? So that some other folks that are that the brokerages put in favorable positions can buy that stock that's got a PE of 4. Now, where do you get a stock that's got a PE of 4 on a major corporation? Duh, I don't know.
No.
They were talking about companies having PEs of 100, right? 27 and stuff like that. PE of 4? Boy, I'll take that one. And the government took an $11 billion hit on a stock that had a PE of 4, paying out dividends now 38 cents a share. Give me a break, man. The reason the Founding Fathers picked out a Republican form of government is because it's easier to bribe everybody so you can bonk it on the head and get goodies out that you didn't deserve to get. It's the same thing with communism. Communism's just better at it. The leverage, you know, because in communism, they get to define what your top-notch, I aspire to be a professor and I will make $200 a month. Whereas professors here, when they aspire to be a professor, they want to make $200 a day or something like that. You see what I'm saying? A professor here wants to make $100,000 a year, right? The professor in Russia gets $200 a month.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? It's a different way of doing things. The folks over here, they're not living by the same kind of commie that the commies over yonder were living under. They wouldn't do it. But they would have, as John was pointing out earlier, that they would have John put a sack on his head and tie a little bow around it so he can't see what's going on. And if John complains about what's going on, they'll accuse him of being all right. You ain't all right. Yeah, you've seen the all right people, right? What do they say? Well, we can have interests of our own that are just like the same sort of interests that everybody else is claiming for themselves. We can claim to have the same interests that we wish to have.
And one of the things, I'm going to hit this real quick, and then we're over time, so we're about to cut it off. But one of the things that we'll say complicates the understanding of it for these little lefties, especially these little safe space college androgenites.
Can I say one more thing?
Huh?
I'm going to say one more thing since John's coming back. What are they going to do when intelligent people decide they're not willing to share power no more?
Are we going to move to the Gulch? We're going to have a strike of the mind?
No. No.
Put up a big magic mirror?
Rand was, you know, planted here by Trotsky kind of people, I think, more than anything else. So she's a little wind-up doll for the people. She didn't solve any problems. Now, let's say some intelligent people decided they wanted to solve a problem or two, and they weren't willing to share power no more with people that weren't smart enough to stop them. What you got?
What I have is the following. There is no way for an intelligent person enclave to be established in America at present time. If John and Rod and Chris and Steve and 20 dozen others of us got together and formed an intelligent man's enclave, this is our tiny little Gulch, we would be subverted, attacked, called elitists, called racists, called this, called that, whatever you want to term it, it would be prevented.
But all we're doing is chartering a corporation, and we're going to try and sell shares.
And they will find a way to short-circuit you.
Now, what sort of freedom is that if you can't even charter a corporation?
There is no freedom in America. There is the freedom for you to serve those who are less able. That's why they are importing millions of immigrants on your ass.
Well, I'm more than willing to.
Your chains.
I can help the people who are less able discover what their best interests are, and I can sell that to them for a profit.
No, you can't.
Oh, they'll buy it. They're buying what the Democrats are people, aren't they?
You can't sell it in the current system. Now, if you go to a freer country than this country, maybe you can.
Okay, well, how about
now, the system that we have in place will not allow you to excel.
Well, can I not inoculate people that have enough intelligence to be inoculated?
They're not going to allow you to disengage yourself from the system. The only way that you could possibly do it would be to pretend to be poor on the outside while you're rich on the inside, just like they did in Russia. You remember the crappy looking houses, but once you got inside, that's where they looked pretty decent. Everybody hid their wealth, if they ever had any. That's what people did in Russia. Well, nowadays, the freer country between America and Russia is Russia.
Well, I think the surest sign that somebody doesn't have wealth is that they spent their money on an Escalade. Because there's $50,000, $70,000 that's going to dissolve into rust.
Okay.
Right?
But it's what they wanted to spend it on. I'm not talking about that. I am talking about a closed society of intellectual or physical or any other type of elitists. Elitism is not permitted unless you pay off the right people. So you have to be part of their elite.
Well, when we go looking, it's like somebody, they went through the door and then they decided to brick up the door they went through themselves. Now, how did they become what they are? They're trying, Castro marched into Cuba with a junta army of 300 men, and they took over the whole island because the puppet that was controlled by, who were those brothers that were in the government?
Batista.
Yeah, Batista was the puppet. But he was so unpopular, it was a paper house. I think we're starting to look at paper house kind of stuff.
Yes. Hillary Clinton is a paper house. She is she's a paper doll. She is physically unable to be president. She has no integrity. Her reputation is nothing. Nobody would
my favorite takedown of her came in 2008 during the campaign. And who's that guy that was on TV that he's an announcer for MSNBC and now he's doing the football games?
I don't remember, but my point is...
But he brought her down. He just stacked everything in, one thing after another, after another, after another. He's a Democrat. He's one of those woohoo Democrats. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And he cut her down like you cutting down a tree, right? And all of a sudden, just because Obama's getting out of office, all of a sudden, All of that he said about her that was perfectly true. None of that's true anymore? Or none of it matters
true.
now?
In Mexico, if you are wealthy, you live behind a brick wall and you have armed security guards.
Well, that's because they got 500 years worth of having their DNA reprogrammed under the Spanish system.
Well, that's what we have here.
Well, I mean, you got a point there.
We have the same.
Well, John, you don't. That's the reason we like beating up on you.
It's the same system here. You're either in the group or you're not in the group. If you're not in the group, they're not going to permit you to excel.
So you've got to have a party, just like the professor I met in Russia said. You must have a party.
I guess.
And well, it means that you have to gang up.
Yeah.
Well, how hard is it for folks to see that you have to gang up?
It's coming.
You can't be just one dude that's going to sit there and wave your bird finger in the air at folks and expect something to happen.
That's correct.
You have to,
so you know what happened in Russia. People formed mafias.
Well, I'm not talking about becoming mafia, but who wants to? Nobody wants to be some stinking corrupt mafia.
Define mafia.
Well, when you start talking about the mafia part of it, you're talking about people that are going, you just made $100 and you need to give half of it to us.
No.
And the protection money and all this kind of stuff.
That's not what I'm talking about at all. That's just one form of business.
Does the mafia over in Italy, does the mafia in Italy own businesses?
No, that's not it at all.
What do you want to argue?
Non-governmental.
All right, we're way off. We're way off our topic. We're stepping on each other, and we're way past time. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it. We can keep chatting after the show, guys. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been the Brushfire Mind. We're here every Friday night at 2100. Starting next week, we'll be streaming live on YouTube. Hopefully, I can get these two old men savvy enough on some electronics that I can make sure that they're there for the show again, because they're going to have to download some software. Sorry, boys, it gets trickier when we lose. But Hangouts is going away. But we're not going nowhere. So 2100 on a Friday night. Follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, donate to the Patreon account. And remember, until next week, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you light a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night.